Morning. Thank you again for coming over. Today is not a hot day. It seems like it's a nice day. Let's see, we have lots of people online. I see right now 65 people there, and we have 20 or so people here. So let's start. We have a list of items to give you updates on, and we have a couple of our people who have to go to other meetings. So let's get started. I won't give you any update first. Let's start with the items we have on the list. And how about if IRB, if Cindy, IRB wants to go first? It's IRB and actually Grace. The two of you are going to talk about award and IRB issues. So let's get you started so Cindy can go back to Sacramento soon.
Well, good morning, everybody. I want to talk about a provision of the common rule. And
it is. They can hear it online.
Okay, so the common rule has been delayed, and it's not going to be effective until January of next year. But they're allowing us to implement 3 provisions in July. And one of those provisions is that we no longer need to review a grant for congruency with the protocol. And so what we've done previously is we've always required investigators to submit the grant to the IRB, and then we look through the grant, we look at the aims, we look at some of the procedures that are going to happen, the area it's going to be done, the population that's going to be involved in it. And then we look at the protocol and we make sure that they're consistent. For example, one time I reviewed a grant, and it was for Native Americans, and it was to look at a health problem of Native Americans. And the protocol was looking at a health problem of African Americans. And so there was a little bit of incongruency there. And so when that happens, I usually would notify the NIH and try to find out what we need to do. And usually the NIH said, it's okay, we'll make a note of this. It's kind of strange, but they wanted us still to make this review. So become July 19th, we will no longer be doing that congruency review. And we're gonna put that burden on the investigator, and which seems the right way to do it. The investigator is the person who developed the proposal and who also is developing the grant, the research under the proposal. And the investigator is in the best position to determine whether the protocol is consistent with the grant. And so we are at this point going to require an attestation that the protocol and the grant are consistent. And I'm going to turn this over now to Grace to talk about the process.
Okay, for those of you watching on Zoom, this is Grace Liu, Associate Director of Sponsor Programs on the award side. So the form you see on your screen, Cassie, can you scroll down? Just want them to see the whole form. Oh, or whoever's operating this keyboard. So when we ask for your IRB protocol starting July 1st, your IRB protocol number for human subjects research, we're also going to ask that you fill out this form. And as you can see, this form asks on the left-hand side, does this project involve human subjects? If you click yes, we're going to ask for your protocol number and the expiration date. There we go. Okay, so the top box asks for the project information, PI last name, and then you can see that it's the project period and sponsor. Now, as you guys all know, there's not a one-to-one correlation between your project and your protocol, meaning sometimes you have different titles. Sometimes the periods aren't identical. They should overlap, but they're not identical. So we want both of that information, the project start date and end date, the IRB protocol number, and that expiration date. And the certification or attestation, as Cindy says, is right here under Principal Investigator. We're asking you that the PI certify that the protocols listed above are approved by the applicable UC Davis Administrative Office, in this case IRB. And sorry, just ignore the IACUC issues for now. We're just talking about IRB. and that no additional protocols are pending or anticipated for this project. And then we're also asking that you certify that the protocol is consistent with the grant funding this project. So basically the PI is responsible for certifying that this is congruent, all right? The burden for congruence has now shifted to the PI starting July 1st in our institution. Okay, and then you are going to send this form to SPO, either your proposal analyst or your award analyst who requested it from you. So this is not something that's going to be routed through Cayuse in most cases. This is going to be something that we request after we're certain that the award is forthcoming. Are there any questions? Cindy?
I have a question.
Give him a
Another
microphone.
provision that we can implement is,
Just one.
okay. Another provision that we can implement is for certain studies, minimal risk, we don't have to do continuing review anymore. I notice on your form you require an expiration date.
That should be my next.
Oh, that was your next thing? Okay, great. So my question was, when you don't have to do continuing review, you may not need that expiration date.
Hi, this is the good news. For minimal risk studies that meet certain conditions, we will no longer require continuing review. And so our system still requires us to enter an expiration date. So an IRB net, there will be an expiration date. And some of you may have experienced that already if we call it a 10-year approval, but really the study is never going to expire. For those studies that you get the 10-year approval, then you could just put it doesn't expire or no expiration date, I would think, on the form. Yes. And so that's the good news is that you have, well, not the bad news, but the little bit of extra work you have to do is promise that the protocol and the grant are consistent. But the good news is that you no longer have to give us a report for continuing review beginning in July for some minimal risk studies. We will tell you which ones and let you know after you submit some stuff to us.
Any other questions online or here?
Hard copy, printed, signed, scanned.
Yes, right now this form is PDF fillable, but yes, filled out, printed, signed. We will accept electronic signatures, but this form is not electronic right now.
Good. Share.
Any other questions?
Nope. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I know Cindy Kyle is going to go to another meeting. And
Same one that Cindy Gates is going to.
yeah, so you can go together.
All right, good morning. Just a couple of updates from me. The first one comes from our animal care team, and they've noticed there are certain sponsors, industry sponsors, that have started asked, when we are about to get a contract or a grant, sometimes they'll do a site visit, right? We see this from the federal government on really big grants. They'll come here and do a site visit to make sure we have the wherewithal, the facilities, those kinds of things in order to make the grant happen. Well, more and more we're starting to see companies that, pharmaceutical companies or others where we're doing some sort of animal care research, and they are sending these forms asking us to fill them out. And they're asking all kinds of questions like, where are all the security portals in your building? And what other animal research is happening around, in your facilities? And how many, cats, dogs, et cetera, are you working on, not just related to that particular study, but asking for building schematics and those kinds of things. And there's a way we can handle this without giving all of that information away to another entity. It's probably not a good idea to just be sending those back with everything filled out, letting them know where all of our security measures are and things like that. Just not a good idea. Use some common sense. And so if you receive one of those from a company that's going to be sponsoring research on our campus, please send it, if it involves animals, please send it to IACUC Donna Routley, and they will assist you in the appropriate responses. Sometimes we could just say, we are ALAC accredited, thus our facilities have been already vetted and to meet your standards. We can do stuff like that instead of actually sending, information that it may not be confidential from a pure, government records act perspective, but we, freely sharing certain things that are sensitive and involve security in particular is probably not a good idea. So that's my comment there. The other item has to do with China, and I don't know if you were going to mention this, Ahmed, but we, because the federal government is engaging in trade tariff kind of activities and protectionist about our economy and everything else, we have also seen this trickle to universities with great concern about our affiliations with Chinese entities and Chinese nationals on our campus, and we're getting and sponsorship from Chinese companies. We're seeing things being written into bills and that we hope won't pass, but things like if we're part of, a 1,000 talent program or the Confucius Institute, we won't be eligible for Department of Defense funds, as an example. They've been asking us for information about certain companies and how many active awards we have with those particular companies. They are looking to rewrite some of the export control rules about what we can and can't share with Chinese nationals, and both here and abroad. And so tightening that up and putting more technologies onto the list that are restricted. So this is more an awareness announcement that this is something that's happening right now. We are also, the FBI has started asking questions about projects and people. And we also have both at the UC system, not necessarily at UC Davis, we are seeing that the Office of Inspector Generals from HHS and NSF are now asking questions about individuals who have affiliations with China. And especially if those affiliations were not identified on your current and pending support forms or your other affiliations in your bio sketches, they're claiming that that's fraudulent to not report that to the federal government. So there's fraud claims if you're not putting those on your forms. So I just wanted you to know about the sensitivities, and if your faculty are engaging in any of these things, just an awareness, and we'll get up, as the rules actually change, if they do change and get all the way through Congress, we will alert you to any of those kinds of changes, because we have significant engagements with Chinese nationals and with China in this at this campus and across the entire UC. So just awareness notice. Any questions? All righty.
Nothing
Thank you.
online. Thank you very much. Let's see, how about next? I know that our colleagues from accounting, they need to go back too. So your update, any update you want to have?
So, yeah, we can do
Come on up. James, good morning.
Good morning.
Oh, you are exercising too.
Yeah,
Huh? That's good.
stretch.
Are you
All right,
leading the,
so,
the class too now?
Yeah, everyone would like to stand, and we'll do some stretches to get the day started. Hey, good morning. Thank you. I thought I would spend just a few minutes. Oh, man, two hands. Goodness, there's no chewing gum involved.
No.
So no, I'm
Let him do that.
All right. So I wanted to share with you what we are doing in contracts and grants accounting with our new billing system. It oops, it is a module of the quality financial system that we just recently brought up to take care of the massive amount of invoicing we're doing on behalf of all these awards that we've got. So before we go into the new system, I just wanted to walk through the way we have been doing it for years and years so that we can compare and contrast just really quickly. So what we've always done is, at a minimum, we, maybe on a monthly basis, depending on what the award requires, our analysts go in, they generate a couple of ledgers, they take the information off of those ledgers and manually type them into an Excel spreadsheet. They then manually go and create a journal voucher to record this income and receivable. They take those documents and route them for approval. The documents are then passed off, and then somebody manually sends them, either prints them out and puts them in the mail, or emails them via, Outlook. And then once the invoices, hopefully the invoices then get paid. When they get paid, when the payment comes in, there's some thinking that has to go on to figure out what do you do with that money, because it's not always clear. And we hope, and then we have to manually type in which payment to apply it to. So all through that process, we're just like praying, oh my goodness, I hope this all lines up correctly, so we don't have to unwind things. So that's what we do now on a whole bunch of stuff. That's what we've done for years and years. But in, I've got the dates on, a few months ago in March, we implemented our new system. So here's what our new system does. Our new system takes a little bit of extra setup. When we get the awards in place, we need to go in and tell the system how we're going to build this, where we're going to send the invoices, how we're going to, what all the, who the customer is, which address to send it to, those types of things. So it takes a little bit of extra setup. But once we have it set up on a monthly basis, we can just run a batch, and that will kick out a whole bunch of invoices for everything that's been set up and it's eligible, has expenses, it's a monthly invoice, we're good to go for it. We do that. Our fund managers then just get a list of the invoices that have been created. They can go into those invoices, say, yep, that's what the invoice should look like. It's straight off the ledger. It's exactly the same numbers that we'd be pulling from those manually generated ledgers. If they're good with it, it currently is still routing to a supervisor. A goal down the road for us a little bit is to really automate some of this billing, but for right now, we're only a few months into it. We're just making sure we're 1,000% comfortable with what the system is generating. Once it's gone through that, then our cash team is able to go in, and for a lot of them, we can let the billing system itself deliver the invoices, transmit the invoices. So they can hit a transmit button, and for, without going into too much detail, it is really the super simple ones that are able to be delivered just to a single email address that we can do that with. But there is a sizable population that we can do that with. The other ones that we deliver via email, where perhaps there are 2 email addresses that they have to be sent to, or perhaps the sponsor requires some, a ledger to go with it, some additional documentation besides the invoice itself. We do have to do a manual invoice, or we print it out and stuff them all into envelopes and send them, or we put them into sponsor systems. But now we've got a pretty streamlined approach for those different flavors of invoices that we're delivering. I'm going to show you what this looks like in a second. Oh, and then when the invoice comes in, we don't have, it's pretty streamlined. We know where to apply that payment more efficiently than we had in the past, where we had a couple of numbers we had to make sure we were hitting correctly. Now there's really just one number, and I'll show you in a minute that often we meaning the cashier's office, are able to just scan it in and have it applied correctly. All right, so like I said, we started the system in March. Starting in March, all of our brand new awards have been set up to go into CGB, Contracts, Grants, Billing module. And we also started converting our existing awards. To date, we've got 500 or so that are in CGB. Francisco was reminding me that we've got 100 or so that are going to get ported in today. So we're trying to bulk up the volume. You know, we like I said, we're starting with our really straightforward ones, and we're going to branch out from there. Getting more complicated ones, different sponsor forms, maybe the SF-270, which is a typical federal form that's required for our reimbursements. I want to get through that. We're not touching letter of credit yet. That will be perhaps a phase coming at some point. The functionality is part of CGB. We just haven't implemented it at this point. Okay, now here's what you all can see. So you will be able to see the invoices, the transactions posting, same as previously. You have to look in the income account though. It's not in your expense account. So you have to remember to look at the whole fund and look at the expenditure account on the fund, the account that starts with 92. You'll be able to see the invoice itself. A PDF will be attached to the KFS document so you can open up and see exactly what was delivered, if you're so inclined. You'll be able to see whether it's been paid right on the screen, what the open balance is. And I'll show you in a second. You'll be able to see where we sent it and how we sent it. All right, so why does that look so good? Is that, okay, all right. Hopefully,
Yeah,
it's a projector, okay. It's yellow for you guys. For Sacramento, it looks great. Okay, okay. I was just thinking, I don't remember shading it that yellow, but okay. So here is the, if you were to do a transaction listing on the income account for a fund that had some CGB invoices in it, again, the income account, 92, ... What the system does is create some entries that go in and out of this account. There's a requirement for us to keep KFS as close to baseline as possible. And what the baseline system does is it posts the receivable into the income account. That's not where we want it for our accounting records, so we put it in and take it out. So what I'm saying here is just ignore that section. Forget it. You don't care about that because that just all comes out to zero anyway. Sacramento, I'm pointing at the zeros. What you are perhaps interested in is, oops, I thought I put a box on this. You're interested in these income lines at the bottom. The CINV are the KFS documents that we were talking about. They are the, well, contract and grant invoices. So if we were to drill into one of those CINVs, we would see, you get your 19, but on the 19, you would be able to find the invoice itself. So if you drill into this PDF, the system creates two invoices. One is the invoice itself, and one is a copy. It has a watermark copy stamp on it. Again, that's baseline. I don't know that we're ever going to need that, but if we wanted an invoice with a watermark that says copy on it, that would be the second one that says copy in the file name. But if you go into the one that's just the PDF itself, you get something like this. To me, this is much prettier than some of the ones we've sent out in the past from our Excel templates. Our Excel templates work fine. They have all the information that's needed, but this just is a little bit more attractive to me. I don't know. So all the information is on here. We have the same types of budget categories that we've had. I think we broke one. I think we threw one additional. The multi-campus, I think, is typically not on our legacy invoices. But this is what it is. At the bottom, I was referring to the efficiency of when the payments come in, that number string at the very bottom, that's readable. So when the cashier's office receives the payment, if the sponsor is kind enough to send that little remit form, they can just scan that in, boom, it's gonna apply right to the payment. If not, the cashier's office is able to do a little bit of checking to figure out where it goes, but still there's just one reference point to apply the payment to, not figuring out which account to put it in and which claim it applies to. Let's see, what else did I want to say about this? I think that's it. So, so that's what it looks like. You can go in and take a look at your invoices if you are curious what they look like. All right. And then if we just kind of bounce back to the financial system. So I took the document itself and I split it over a few screens so that I could get it readable for you. So this is what that, if I'm going to bounce back, that invoice for $1,480.59 on the invoice in the system. This is what it looks like. We can see up at the top, the invoice amount, the amount that's open is 0. So that means this invoice has been paid in full. So that's another thing. We've been sending invoices out and we've been getting payments in and applying them, and it's all so far so good. There is a lot of detail that's broken out on the multiple tabs. I want to point out this proposal number. This is a KFS system proposal number. This is not related to any kind of SPO reference number. So, all right. Going further down the document, we can see additional detail, the amounts, oops, wrong button. The amounts that we're invoicing. The one column there, when we are working on the invoices, this is where we can control the amount that we need to actually display on the invoice. So if we need to take some expense out or add something in, ideally, we're just taking everything just right off the ledger and not adjusting those numbers, but we can. Those are those details. And then you go further down and you can see what the transmission of that invoice was, what the method was. So this one says it was through the mail and it went to such and such address. Without getting too far into the weeds, we've only got a couple of options available for us for our transmission method. Currently, it's either through mail or through email. If it says through email, those are the ones that actually we're letting the system send the email out. There's a possibility that even though it says mail, for us, through mail is the catch-all for anything that isn't just system email delivered. So this one actually was sent through the Postal Service mail. But if you look down in the notes on the document, I wrote on here in the notes, that will also tell you exactly what happened, because the ones that we have to send to multiple email addresses or that we submit through sponsor systems, those we have to tag as through mail, just meaning not email. I guess that's the, but we have to keep it at baseline, so we're not allowed to adjust them. All right, so that's a quick run through of what we're doing, where we are. We've got a sizable percentage of awards in there. We're trying to get further and further along. Any questions, comments, thoughts? Cassie? Nope. All right. If you have a question, let us know. And that was really, I didn't have any other comments from contracts and grants accounting. I don't, Mike, do you have anything? All right.
Well, I have a question for Mike. I mean, 2 more days in this fiscal year, and starting from beginning of next week, we would be in provisional. So questions coming to me regarding, is there any update on F&A next step?
We will be in provisional status.
Okay.
For the foreseeable
So there is
future.
no update.
The proposal's been into the government for about 9 months, and they haven't even started it yet.
Okay.
And that's about Berkeley. It took them 2 years to actually get to working on their proposal, and they just started working on theirs, and they submitted 2 years ago. So that's about how far behind and unimportant this is to the government right now.
Okay, thank you. So for foreseeable future, it's
we're going to be
57%.
funded and billing at our current rates,
Right.
the 57 for research and whatever the
Mhm.
OSA and the primate ones and stuff like that.
Sure, sure.
And then the CBRs will not change for next year also.
Okay. Okay, good.
But yeah, we will, when we get closer to the first questions, we will start bringing up some information on when we think it might start happening. But until I get even a first communication back, except for the fact I got an email that said we have it and it's in the queue, and that was 9 months ago.
Okay,
We will start talking about it more than.
okay.
Because I
Thank you for
don't
that.
have anything.
We have another question for you.
All right.
Can you repeat the question now? What about, will the composite benefit rates be changing?
The composite, will the composite benefit rates be changing? The composite benefit rates are, oh gosh.
So we are getting Mike to come up here.
The composite benefit rates will be the same for this next fiscal year until we go to UC Path. Then the whole process changes once hit UC Path. And if we keep online or on schedule, it would be March. So the last, I don't know if it's the March 1st or it's the pay on April from the March. So whatever that date we flip to UC Path, we all go to the UC Path Center. We go to their section of rates, and we'll be sending out stuff on that later this summer because we have to submit that proposal to the government through OP because OP is kind of doing the whole for each of the 10 campuses. So it comes away from us and it goes to the Path Center. So we're starting to work with them to get our employee groupings and figure out what's going on with that. So that would be like the last month or two of the fiscal year. And then going forward would be into the Path CBR rates. So it's more of the all 10 campuses would be fairly similar. There's 10 standard rates that all campuses can use or not use, and they can collapse them, and they can do 4 campus-specific rates depending on your employee population. So we're trying to massage the data to get it as close to what we have with fitting into the rules that Path gave us. So that's kind of where CBRs are going.
Any more questions? Well, thank you very much, Mike.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, how about next we talk about the proposal process update that Kelly, Associate Director here on the proposal side, has been working with the team for the last month or so, and she has updates on that.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Over the last couple of months, the proposals team has been working to identify ways that we can streamline and standardize the proposal process, not only to benefit campus stakeholders, but to benefit the staff here as well in terms of having set expectations for what they can expect from campus departments. Likewise, campus departments know what to expect from us. So as part of that process, we have been doing outreach with campus departments. We've just scratched the surface, so if we haven't gotten to your department, don't worry, we will be out. And in meeting with those departments, we are talking about what we require for submittals and what our process looks like, as well as getting their feedback into what's working well for them and maybe things that we can change. We've gotten a lot of really, really good feedback from departments, and we have been working to incorporate that feedback into our processes where feasible and appropriate. So I wanted to take this opportunity to let you guys know about some of the changes that we've recently made. And maybe some things that aren't new, but that people just didn't realize about the way proposals operates. The first one, which is new, if we get shell proposals or incomplete proposals, which means they don't have a budget or a budget justification or a complete scope of work, we're going to be returning those from the intake desk. The reason we're going to be doing that is it takes a lot of effort to try to gather that information from departments and PIs when maybe they really aren't ready to submit and they're trying to hold a place in line. That's creating a backlog. And we really want to make sure that what we're getting is complete and we can begin working on it. So intake desk will be returning those, again, directly to the campus departments. Now, if we have a proposal that just has a minor irregularity or maybe one item is missing that's not essential, we're going to go ahead and still assign it to a proposal analyst, and they will go ahead and reach out to the campus department asking for that information. We will be requesting that it be returned by a specific date in order to allow enough time for a full review to take place. So we hope that kind of clarifies the missing documentation piece for folks out there. The other thing that is new is we are not going to proceed with a proposal review until we have PI certification in place. So if we get a proposal that's lacking PI certification, we'll go ahead and assign it to an analyst, but it will be held in pre-review status until we get that certification. PI understands responsibilities and is standing behind what they are proposing in that document. Again, the analyst will reach out with a deadline for returning that certification to ensure enough time for a full review. We are going to be operating in general on a first in, first out basis. to make sure that people that submit their items with ample time actually receive a full review and aren't scrambling at the last minute. So again, first in, first out, we hope that will make things a little bit more fair for our campus stakeholders. And then finally, I just want to remind people about timeframes. This is not anything new, but it's always a good reminder to let people know that for a full review, we ask for 5 full days from the date it's received in this office. So sometimes it may take a day or two to route here. Put that into consideration in departmental timelines to make sure we get it here with 5 full business days. If we receive less than 5 full business days, it will likely be a limited review. Time permitting, we will do a full review. It's just not guaranteed. If it comes in the day it's due, it's likely going to receive no review. Full review is important because it allows us to take care of any issues, terms and conditions, most important, budgetary or indirect costs. If those aren't taken care of at the proposal stage, it has to be taken care of at the award stage, which may add additional time and effort on that end. So it's really important that we try to take care of that up front. And then finally, to sort of help facilitate the process and make it easier on everybody, we've created a proposal checklist that's on our website that departments can download that just sort of highlights the things they should be thinking about in submitting to us with their initial CAIUS request. So we hope that's helpful as well. Anybody have any questions? Okay, thank you.
That was fast. Thank you. No questions online either?
I answered it. There was one question. The only question that came up online, and I was just going to address it later, but is just to confirm that the PI certification is done through CAIUS SP. And yes, it is. That's part of that routing process.
Yeah, on that issue of PI certification, thank you, Kelly and Cassie talking about that. That's extremely important. We have been receiving some proposals that they go through full routing. And when you look at the line which says whether PI has certificate or not, it shows that PI has not certificated. I mean, the certification is not there. So in those situations, it really doesn't make any sense for us to start working on the proposal because we get all of our directions from the PI, and the PI is the one who has to tell us that, yes, this is what they want, and they are going to comply with the policies that federal government mostly wants them to follow. And if they haven't taken that step, they may know the most important step of the process is missing. So that's why we would wait till that certification comes in, and hopefully it would come in without missing a deadline. So you want to be careful about that. No more questions. I don't see anything here either. Okay. So let's see. Since we are talking about proposals, how about if Alisa and Chris, the 2 team leaders for proposal team, would come up and talk about the guidance on the cost sharing and so on and so forth.
Okay, so we've had a lot of questions lately on cost sharing on proposals, what documentation is required and when it's allowable. And so we just wanted to go over briefly and provide you with some additional guidance. We also have a more extensive matrix that we're gonna make available. That'll give you a lot more detail.
There's handouts in the back, and for those that are here presently, then they'll be emailed out.
Exactly, so this is a brief overview. And so first of all, we wanted to give you just a few tips, general guidelines for cost sharing in general. And that is, the first one is don't use federal funds as a cost share commitment unless it's specifically allowed by the sponsor. So if we're gonna use federal funds as cost sharing, we have to have explicit permission. We always require a commitment letter if there's third-party cost sharing. So if you're partnering with industry and they're offering funds, we don't wanna submit that proposal with that cost share commitment unless we have a letter. We also require a letter if it's a sponsor requirement. So if the sponsor wants you to include it, then we want to see that letter. We strongly discourage voluntary cost sharing. So it's not required by the sponsor. There's nothing in the guidelines about that says cost sharing is required. We really don't want to offer cost sharing. Creates a post-award administrative burden, and it also has a lot of accounting implications that we want to avoid. So cost shared funds in general are subject to the same terms and conditions as a sponsored funding. So if you're going to cost share, then those funds suddenly become project funds. So you have to think about it that way. Once in a while, the sponsor will say you can pay for something that's not allowable as cost sharing. So we want to review guidelines in those cases. So here's a few scenarios that we wanted to go over. The first, voluntary committed for U.S. government and nonprofit sponsors. So this is cash or in-kind contributions. We're not talking about effort here. We're going to require some type of documentation. So a letter, an email from the chair, somebody who has the authority to commit those funds. We want some kind of documentation before we submit to the sponsor that these are actual commitments. We strongly discourage, again, voluntary committed cost sharing. So as much as possible, we want to avoid that. Then there's mandatory. A lot of programs, I wouldn't say a lot, but significantly, when we have programs, especially for instrumentation, things like that, they're going to require a match. So like a 1-to-1 match or 50%. So we can use cash or in kind for that, but we're going to want some type of documentation. If it's not required but encouraged, sometimes we come across proposals that say they encourage cost sharing. And in those cases, again, we try to perhaps describe the resources that are not really quantifying them. So it's preferable if you say, here are all the things that we're going to provide this without quantifying it, without making them actual cost sharing, but sort of highlighting the things that we are providing. And effort is sort of a secondary consideration, would be our preferred, rather than providing cash or something that we have to track. So mandatory cost sharing for-profit sponsors. So this has come up recently, and in general, it's not allowed. We don't want to use our public funds for a private benefit. Once in a while, we can make an exception for for-profit sponsors, and that's when they usually have a charitable arm. Sometimes they have a call for proposals where the opportunity is really to benefit the researcher. It's not to benefit the company. So perhaps they're saying, here's our charitable arm and we're just giving money so that you can accomplish something. And then perhaps an exception can be made for cost sharing. But in general, if it's a for-profit sponsor, we don't allow cost sharing. So I'm gonna hand it to Chris so she can go over the next slide.
Yeah. All right, so continuing on with the for-profits, we went from mandatory to now voluntary committed cost share. So again, this is talking about cash or in kind, and generally it's not allowable. There may be some exceptions in some cases where, again, like Elisa was saying with the mandatory side, that it could be beneficial to the project. So we want to actually have that conversation before you start to commit something on a for-profit, just to make sure that it's in line with university policy and an exception can be made on a for-profit.
Yeah, on that issue of cost sharing with for-profit, also remember that if the for-profit is expecting to get any position on licensing of the results, if they are not paying full cost, we would not be able to guarantee any license to them either.
Thank you. I was going to mention that because we want to be able to offer them a right to license, but that means that the sponsor needs to have paid the full direct and indirect of that project. If you're cost sharing on that project, that for-profit company is not paying the full direct and indirect. And you'll hear that from our office quite a bit when we see cost share on a for-profit proposal come through. You'll see that question come through from us quite frequently. Again, we need to have that conversation before that commitment is made so that we can see whether or not an exception can be made. And if so, then again, we would need a letter or an email from the person who can commit those funds. For faculty effort, this is the most common that we see. For mandatory or voluntary, we see the salary and benefits for the faculty member. One thing that seems to be a little bit confusing, especially since we've gone to Cayuse SP, is that do they need an additional letter of support for that effort that's being cost shared on behalf of the faculty member? And by the submission of the IPF, they do not need an additional letter or email confirmation on the effort they're providing as cost share within the IPF. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact our office before submitting your IPF so that we can help you to make sure that that's properly identified in the proposal when it comes over. The in-kind for non-faculty personnel and support staff identified in the proposal for mandatory or voluntary, These positions are not generally cost shared because they're not a faculty appointment position that don't carry the allowance of cost share. With that, then we are going to need documentation in the form of a letter or an email to see where that person's commitment effort is coming from to ensure that the people who, for that person's appointment, there is coverage and we're not utilizing, we're not utilizing federal funds to cost share on another project because that's not appropriate. So we want to make sure that those funds have been appropriately identified in a way that is using funds that can be identified as cost share.
Chris, I wanted to add, you could use the SP
Microphone.
module. You could use the SP module if you added these, even though they're not senior personnel. You could add a position there and have it certified through Cayuse SP, but you would have to add them.
Yes, thank you for that clarification. And again, the analysts, when they're doing their review of the proposal, may ask qualifying questions or ask for additional information just to make sure that we've documented the file appropriately and accurately, so that there's no question at the award side when the awards team goes to process the information. And so accounting has what they need to make sure that everything's been identified correctly. And then we have the in-kind, non-effort, mandatory, or voluntary. So voluntary cost sharing is discouraged, again, unless it's something that's been identified specifically in the sponsor's RFP, request for proposal, or request for application. Again, it's because it causes an undue burden on several different divisions, your division as a department, accounting, so on, and it becomes part of the actual proposal. So it's something that we do try to discourage. However, if it's something that is really, the PI is really wanting to do it, we can talk about it, and documentation will need to be provided in the form of a letter or an email so that we can have all of our records in line for processing of the award. In addition, in-kind or cash matching third-party cost sharing, mandatory or voluntary. So voluntary cost sharing is, again, discouraged because it becomes an administrative burden unless it is required by the sponsor. So if it's voluntary, we are going to try to discourage you again because of the administrative burden on it. We will ask for documentation to validate the information, and depending upon the type of third-party cost sharing, that can get a little sticky. So we might ask for clarifying information. If somebody is submitting something, say, as a gift, then there could be also a gift fee that's associated that people need to be aware of and mindful of when processing that cost sharing. So just be mindful of the implications on a possible gift fee or the implication of indirect cost assessment too for those funds that are being cost shared. And then for unrecovered indirect costs, sponsor required rates reduction. We see this sometimes with special RFPs where sponsor will reduce the indirect cost rate and then require mandatory cost sharing on some projects with like U.S. Department of Forest Service. They will allow with that reduction a 20% match requirement, and an offset of your indirect costs can be applied. So that would be the difference of the indirect cost rate to the rate that it's reduced to. Again, it has to be specified by the sponsor to be allowable to use that reduction and offset of indirect cost. And it should be vetted through our office first to make sure that it is possible for you to do that, because we don't want to waste your time when preparing your budget. So it's not likely in all cases, but it could be possible. When you're dealing with a for-profit, again, like Ahmad said, if we're not paying the full direct and indirect, it has some impact and implication at the award phase if the project does come to fruition and something is discovered. You need to be mindful of that if there is an exception that's made on a for-profit basis. Documentation will be required, and we'll have to also submit information to the sponsor to make sure that everything is in line with the allowance for the indirect cost as well as in line for the budget and for accounting purposes.
I wanted to make one additional comment, is that unrecovered indirect costs are sometimes used to also talk about the indirect costs we would have charged if our cost sharing was charged to the project. So maybe you have in-kind effort and you have a mandatory match. You can, the rate's 57% on both the project. You can also go ahead and calculate what that 57% would have been on that, those direct charges that we're cost sharing. And that's a little bit different. We don't need background for, or we don't need documentation for that. And we usually do that unless specifically prohibited by the sponsor. We allow that.
So these are all the resources that you saw at the bottom of each of those slides that identifies where the different policies are for indirect costs and how to apply indirect costs, or I keep saying indirect costs, cost sharing, excuse me. So these are really helpful, again, with the handout that is provided in the back and that will be sent out to those who aren't in attendance here today. This also is information that's provided on that form too that Cassie and Pat have put together, and they did a wonderful job to help you guys understand what the policies are in case you have any questions. And after reading those and trying to implement things into your projects that you're preparing, if you have any questions, that's what our office is here for. So please feel free to give us a call if you have any questions about cost sharing, because we want to make sure that we can help you and get your IPF submitted appropriately without having to do additional changes to it once it's received in our office. Does anybody have any questions?
So there's a question online about if there are template or instructions on how to complete the cost sharing section of the internal processing form in Cayuse SP. The answer is yes. The instructions are on the budget page right above where you add your cost sharing. It actually tells you what you should be entering. It's also found in the handbook on our training page. And so I will send that link out on Zoom, but anyone who goes to our training site with our user guides, the main handbook for PIs and contract and grant staff and approvers actually has instructions on that as well.
Microphone.
Can you address the allowability of unrecovered indirect costs on third-party direct cost contributions?
So I think what Pat's talking about is if we got a third-party contribution, like we were partnering with industry and they were giving us $100,000 in kind, perhaps they were going to do services at their company and they're partnering with us on this project, would we go ahead and calculate our 57% on that? And the answer would be no. If it's not coming here, we wouldn't. So all third-party matches, if they're in kind and they're staying at the sponsor, we wouldn't. If those matches are coming here and it's $100,000 they're giving us in cash, well, we may calculate 57% on it, but that's within that $100,000. We're going to consider that a sponsored project if they're partnering with us and they're donating, possibly if it's not a gift. So we wouldn't, in addition, apply that as cost sharing. So it wouldn't be $100,000 plus 57% cost sharing, because they aren't our funds. We wouldn't recoup those.
Any more questions?
There's no more, no? Okay, good. Thank you very much. So Cassie, I think it's your turn to talk about Cayuse SP tips that you want to share.
So I think it's actually a really good segue from what we've been talking about. So thank you, Ahmad, for changing it around. I'm
So
just
shuffling them.
I am going to turn off the projector because I don't think, no, you still need it, don't you, Ahmad?
Yes, that
So
would be
I'm
good.
going to leave it on. So there is a handout in the back on Cayuse SP tips. All of this will also be on our website underneath the research administration form section. But I did want to go through a few of the things. And one thing that actually we've kind of been talking about already is the fact that there are some routing issues, right? So I think anyone in the room has probably dealt with some routing issues. So I want to talk about how you can kind of avoid some of those. So this is the document I'm mentioning, and it's broken down by section. So one of the things that happens with the routing is that many units have more than one unit code. And all of our professional profiles, all of our profiles in Cayuse SP are driven by the Cayuse 424 professional profile. So if your investigator's Cayuse 424 professional profile is linked to a department code that is associated with payroll and not the one associated with contracts and grants, then you have to change that on the internal processing form each time you add them to that proposal. So my advice is to update the Cayuse 424 professional profile. And I have a link here that has instructions on how to do that. The investigator can do that, but they can also give other people access to do that as well. And once that is updated, the following day, every time they're added to a proposal, it will default to the correct unit. So that's one big thing we see. Also, this doesn't happen too much, but every now and then there may be a unit for either an administrative unit or a PI that's added to the internal processing form, but that unit may not have a lot of contracts and grants through it. They may not hardly do any, and therefore they may not be set up. So I have instructions or a link to instructions on how you can look to see if the units you're working with have an IPF approver established. That is the key. You want to make sure they all have an IPF approver established, and that IPF approver does not say OR Cayuse Help or Cassie Obolero. We're trying to catch some things, but we can't guarantee it. So if you see that, there's probably an issue. Another thing is when you're adding an administrative unit or a person, when you want to make sure that you look at that unit. I already talked about this unit code issue. It could say, if you look, the way you know that the unit should not be selected is it will say, it'll have a parentheses after the unit name, and it may say non-admin department. That means do not select that department as an administrative unit because they do not administer grants. Maybe it's a cluster, right? Clusters don't get credit for the grants. So think about that administrative unit as the unit, the department that should be getting credit for that grant, okay? The next thing you may see is it may say non-admin / home department. That means don't select it at all, period. Not even as a person's home department because that's probably their payroll code or something like that. What more often you're gonna see though is you'll see the unit code and then in parentheses, or the unit name, and then parentheses, it'll say use, and it'll have a set of numbers that is not the one that you're looking at. So what you wanna do is if you see, say you see med ophthalmology use 049066, that means change that unit code right there to 049066. If you do that, you're really gonna mitigate most of those routing errors that we have. That's really the main things. Another one that's been popping up is internal cost sharing. So I did wanna talk about that. There are instructions on the budget tab as well as in our handbook. And if you're online, I've sent those links to you. I'll also have them available on our research admin forum section of the website, so you'll be able to find them easily. But essentially, when you're adding internal cost sharing, do not select the unit or units that are providing the money, because what will happen is it will route to them for approval as well or get stuck because there's a little issue in the system. So what we want you to do is select the unit that says internal cost sharing. It's INTL cost sharing. And then you add all of your internal cost sharing into one entry right there. And there's detailed instructions on how to do it, but essentially you're giving us the information of what unit is providing the cost sharing or units and the amounts that they're providing in the comments section. And if you'll also be uploading the required documents that Chris and Elisa talked about. So if you do those things, you're really, really going to be avoiding your routing issues. The last things I actually want to say, there's a few more about routing. One, after you get your IPF, your internal processing form ready, you think it's ready to go, look at your approving units list very closely and make sure that it doesn't have any of these issues I've talked about. Now, in these cases, you may see some unit codes on your list that have the language I was talking about not using, which is appropriate as long as they're there because they are approving for another unit or because they have to approve kind of in a hierarchical order. For example, in medicine, the School of Medicine has to review their proposals, right, before they come to us. So even though you don't manually add School of Medicine to your internal processing form, if you have an investigator from School of Medicine, the School of Medicine is going to automatically be added. And I have further instructions on kind of how to do the ordering, but really check their proving units list before submitting for routing and make sure that it's correct and order it as appropriate. Also, after you submit for routing, it pops up on a page that shows you the routing. So look at it again. Just check it again. And if you notice any blanks under roles or authorizing persons is what it says. If you see any blanks or OR Cayuse Help or Cassie Obolero, go ahead and email the help desk and we'll help you get it situated right away so that it doesn't get stuck and it doesn't get delayed. We already talked about PI certification. So we've already talked about that we are not going to be doing assignments without PI certification, right? Another thing I have in here is just a table to help you determine when you need to create an internal processing form, because there's been some questions about that, especially for amendments and such. So just look at the table and it really outlines what the action you would be performing is if you need to create an IPF and what the proposal type would be for that IPF. There's definitions and there's also some special instructions and comments that we worked on as a group in SPO. CGA notification. It's come up. People have been kind of curious about how CGA gets notified of new awards. So whenever an award is made active, obligated, and it has a detailed budget, then when that day that it's made active, it'll be added to a feed that will go to CGA the following day. And then contracts and grants accounting gets notified and they begin their process, which has remained the same. They hope and their goal is always to establish the fund within 5 days if there aren't any issues and the information is complete. Otherwise, they'll be, in contact with you and when the fund is approved, it generates an email to the primary admin contact to set up the expense account. Right? Okay. I checked with CGA on all of that. Also, something that's come up is granting access to awards from an internal processing form. So whenever you create an internal processing form, the people who are listed on the investigators research team tab of that internal processing form will automatically have access to any award that it's created. So if you have a financial person or someone in your department that's going to need access to that award, go ahead and add them to the internal processing form using the role other participant no routing. That way it won't route to their department for approval, but that's a way to give people just kind of instantaneous access whenever an award is created. Also, utilize the help resources. On each of the internal processing form pages, there's instructions at the top or maybe even somewhere throughout. Pay attention to those. Just read the instructions real quick and it might give you some advice or help you answer questions appropriately, etc. We talked about the internal cost sharing, right? So that's one example. Right above internal cost sharing, there's a note there telling you how to enter it. So we're trying to do what we can to help you with that. Additionally, we have a lot of resources on our resources page, and that's spark.ucdavis.edu/training. Again, this will be on our website. But we have an interactive how-to guide where if you launch it, you can go to the certain area of what you're trying to find information on and then roll over, like say it's about access issues, you'll click access and there's a list of questions. You can roll over them and it'll give you the answer, or you can click the video link and it'll take you to a really short YouTube video. So we want to make sure everyone knows about that. Plus we have a lot of quick start guides and handbooks. I think people are probably aware that the UC Davis Health Clinical Trials Contracts Office will be coming on board July 1st for all of submissions to them for industry-sponsored clinical trial requests. And so there's a handbook on this site for how to do that too, because there's a few different differences. We have an FAQs page, and we also offer training sessions most Thursdays in this room from 9 to 11. They're on our website, so you can find the list of those. Most of them are Cayuse related, but we're adding a lot of other things as well as we move forward. So that is what I have. Does anyone have questions about Cayuse SP or anything? All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a lot of information. And I want to make sure that everybody knows that Cassie has done a great job over the last couple of years working on all of these documents, training manuals, and so on and so forth. Everything she talked about, I know she talked really fast. There was a lot of information there. All of that is properly documented in different areas. In the trainings, you can come, join us on Thursdays that she talked about on the website and so on and so forth. So all of that is there. There is a lot of support there. And thank you, Cassie. And you are answering a question now.
Yes. So I have a question about advance accounts. How are they routed through the system? So we're actually kind of working on a new process here, and we're implementing it. But when you submit an advance account request from your proposal, it routes first to the pre-award spending approver for the administrative unit. Once that person has approved it, it comes to our office and sponsor programs for review. So once you submit it, it's in submitted status. It will say authorized once your department has approved it and it has been assigned and sponsored programs. Once it has been approved by a mod, it will be changed to funded.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't need it anymore for some reason, we move it to deleted status, but it still stays in the system. And I think there's also a rejected status. And if you see rejected, that means that your department rejected it, is what that means, not us.
Can you let people know how to initiate the advance?
Yes, so the way you initiate an advance account request is you go to the internal processing form that it's related to, and you go to the accounts tab. You select add advance account request, doing this by memory, and you enter all of the information we need in that text field. So we need an alternate source of funds. We need an account number in case that funding doesn't come through. We need a reason why you need this. We need the amount of the request. That's very important. The what? The duration, how long you need that money for, right? Yeah, the fund, the alternate source of funds, we need the account number. Additionally, we need you to go to proposal attachments and upload your evidence of firm commitment and anything else that we might need. So, and that's also where you check the status. So the way you check the status is you go back to that internal processing form, go to the accounts tab, and it says the status, submitted, authorized, etc. You can also open the PDF, and if you see that first signature has been obtained, then that means that it's been authorized. Okay, so let me see, I think there's another question. Okay, so two also asked, can a Cayuse link be added to the chair approval in the email notification? I thought it was there. We'll look at that. I know it is in the IPF one, but it may not be in the advanced account notification. So we'll definitely take a look at that. And then someone else said, the School of Medicine Unit Code 43 has use 049000 at the end of it. Should this be added in addition? Does this need to be updated to reflect the change? The answer is no, that should not be added in addition. The only time you should select 049000 is if that is the administering unit of the grant. They do not have investigators that they approve effort for, and they also do not administer grants, and to my knowledge. But if that's the case, that's when you would then, in the administrative unit, instead of selecting 43, select 049000. Now, you're more likely to see this on your approving units list or that routing chain, because School of Medicine has to approve for every medicine department. So if you have one medicine department on your IPF, it is appropriate to see Unit Code 43 on your routing chain. However, they should be last. They should be last, or at least after all of the medicine departments.
Okay.
Okay, that's it.
Thank you. Back to the advanced account and all of the requirements that Cassie talked about. By the time it gets to me for final review, what I have to look at is that there's a firm commitment. If there is no firm commitment, we would not be able to approve it. And that definition of firm commitment by UCOP is that it has to be something, obviously it's something less than a full award, but it is a commitment from sponsor that the award is coming. So just sending a proposal out doesn't mean award is coming. And also NSF, for example, if your program officer says that, yeah, no, everything is fine and award is coming per NSF policy, we cannot rely on that. NSF tells us that that's not enough guarantee. You have to get the word from the contract officer. So there is the issue that we have to think about there. Now, let's see. I think we are almost done. We have a little bit of time. I wanted to bring to your attention something that's going on, something extremely important around the campus, having to do with strategic planning, which is under the provision of, I think it's called Go Bold. The chancellor and the provost office, they are working on planning for years to come for the campus to think about different areas that enhancement is needed. As far as infrastructure is concerned, trying to bring, diversify to different areas of research and so on and so forth. So I want to just share with you a word from our sponsor. Let's see, how do I share the screen here? No, just get rid of share screen. That one. I don't want share screen. Okay, there it is. Here is our sponsor. So how come the voice is not there? How do you make this louder? It used to be fine this morning, so we'll see if it comes up again. Cassie still is working on it to get the volume up. That's it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go again.
An exciting time in UCD.
Okay.
Our potential to grow as a powerful education, research, and public service institution has never been greater. Our strategic planning process, called the Boldly Go, will serve as our guide to get where we want to be. This is where you come in. We're looking for your input. Tell us your highest level ideas that could push us to fulfill our mission in the most creative and bold ways. Imagine UC Davis 10 years from now. What would our university look like? Who would you want us to be? How could we achieve your vision? I've heard some ideas already. They include enhancing research excellence, or optimizing pedagogy to prepare our students for the coming decades, or creating an inclusive and diverse campus community. So give this some thought. Talk with your peers. Then go to boldlygo.ucdavis.edu, where we have an easy form where you can submit your ideas and strategies. It's simple and quick. Think about big and bold ideas. The greater your participation, the better the future for us all here. Thank you, and go ahead.
And then, let's see. I have another one here too. I need Cassie's help.
It still should be on that same.
Okay. Students have been extremely vocal on this. And here I want you to see this.
Yeah, I'm working on a new 10-year plan for UC Davis. It's happening right now, and I need your help. This is a chance for you to keep your mind inside of UC Davis in more 10 years. We're looking for ways to solve the problems that hit home and pursue the big ideas with you.
I have an assignment to do right now, and there's no Wi-Fi around here. I think we should work on modernizing our campus infrastructure. I'm late for my bus again. We should really work on more innovative modes of transportation.
I have a midterm tomorrow, and there's no place to sit and study. I think we should make smart ways to use our space. So if you have a vision, plan, concern, or idea, we want to hear it. Even though you and I may not benefit from the 10-year plan of current students, you can be sure that it'll make a difference for those who follow us. This is the time to make a mark. And who knows, what you have to say could just change things for everyone. Plus, it's quick and easy to contribute. Just go to boldlygo.ucdavis.edu. All right, Ivy. We look forward to hearing from you. Yes, sir.
Okay. There is on the website that the chancellor was pointing to, if you search for Go Bold, there is, the document is there. And when you go through that, there are 5 or 6 areas in there. One area has to do with expansion of research on campus. You saw that the students are very active out there, and they are talking to each other and asking the question, what do they need? On the area which talks about research, talks about a lot of issues related to infrastructure for research. I think this is our chance to talk about and provide input that also the human resources who support the research in department as well as central areas. That is an area that should be looked at. I didn't see anything in there which talks about enhancing the support in departments for research, even though there's a lot of discussion of support for research. So this is our chance to talk about that. I think that is all we have. I don't see anybody from RCI here. If there's not time for questions, either from here or online, regarding anything we talked about or anything we didn't talk about. Cassie forgot to do something.
I did. I forgot. I wanted to introduce Sal Mendez, our new help desk analyst. Okay. So I just wanted everyone to kind of put a face to a name. So this is Sal, everybody. And what is this, your second week?
Yeah, this is the start of middle of the 3rd week, actually.
3rd week. Okay. So Sal is our new help desk analyst, and he's been doing great. So I wanted everyone to kind of see Sal.
Anything you want to say, Sal?
I work in the health system, so some of you may have interacted with me via emails. So that's about it.
Yeah.
Good.
And we also have another new employee, Ken Wei. I forget his last name. Hi. And he's doing intake proposal. So we're getting staffed up, and we're excited. But I want to introduce everybody now.
Thank you very much. So it's 10 minutes before 10. If there's nothing else, we can stop now. Thank you for coming over or visiting us online. See you next month. I saw that. Yeah, I saw at one point. I couldn't believe it.